Open world first person shooter in the year 2023 usually means a modern generic Ubisoft Far Cry game. However, there was a series that used to do this genre much better. I am of course talking about Stalker. This is a series that has always oozed atmosphere, particularly the first game, Shadow of Chernobyl. Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, is the latest upcoming entry in the series, and it's coming out in Q1 2024 supposedly, which is probably sooner than most people predicted. Aside from the release date, there has also been a brand new dev interview, which gives us a ton of information on the game. So, we're going to cover all of it. When a classic series is getting a brand new modern entry, there are always mixed feelings. On one hand, it's nice to see a series like Stalker getting revived, but on the other, living up to the legacy is always a challenge. What I will say is in terms of visuals and atmosphere, Stalker 2 does look fantastic. If you're not familiar with some of the older games like Shadow of Chernobyl, the most modern similar series that comes to mind is Metro, which certainly took a lot of inspiration from Stalker. Think of a post-apocalyptic Fallout-like setting, but even grittier, darker, and even more dangerous. The devs themselves, they describe the game as being not just an FPS, but somewhat of an immersive sim. I am curious about that, as to me, that would indicate that it should include RPG elements, and while I know there are multiple endings, it'll be interesting to see if the overall game is more of an RPG than its previous entries, which I would simply consider just to be open world shooters with some survival elements in them. That being said, the studio has recently committed to a Q1 2024 release date, and they have reinforced that during a recent dev interview that fans have translated. The interview is with the CEO of GSC Game World, who are the development studio behind the game, and many of the questions they refer to a playable demo that attendees of an event were able to play. Regarding the game's story, the interviewer asked, "What kind of story does Stalker 2 tell?" They replied, "The game's plot is non-linear, and the player's choices and behavior will determine what direction the plot goes in. You cannot experience all the stories in one go, and the main story itself, it'll take upwards of 40 hours. This answer would suggest that the multiple endings aren't simply a handful of choices to be made right at the end of the game, but that earlier choices may lead you down different paths. I'll be curious to see then if these different ending paths will result in different missions, unique pieces of content to experience, or if the changes are just going to be minor. 40 hours is also very long for an open world shooter main story. I mean, if he'd said that the entire game, including side content, was 40 hours, I'd see that as pretty standard, realistic, but 40 hours, that sounds maybe too good to be true. Maybe he's talking about 40 hours of unique content if you add up all of the different ending scenarios together. Maybe he's done that in his head and that's how he's come up with the 40 hours. But I mean, if it's genuine, if it's 40 hours, no matter what path you pick, that's the length of the main story, I'll be impressed. That'd be fantastic. They then discuss how many endings the game will have, and the CEO answers with, "The main story, it's got 4 endings. Side quests will also have different results based on the player's choices, and some side tasks will also affect the main story in some way." This is intriguing as we are very much in RPG territory if we're talking about side quests having multiple outcomes based on choices. I am also curious as to what he means about the results of side quests affecting the main plot. I wonder if it could be something like, if you do a side quest for a major character and you piss them off, does that mean that later in the game they won't be there for the main quest and you'll instead perhaps have to help a different NPC? It is also very easy to talk about all this reactivity, but I'm yet to see any of this in action via direct footage for the most part, so we'll have to see them actually back it up in reality. The interviewer, in very typical game journo fashion, they start talking about the demo just being too hard. They ask what can be done to make killing enemies easier. They answer with, you can play with a stealth approach, which is often seen as the best way to deal with some scenarios. There is also an armor system for enemies, and appropriate weapons or equipment must be used when dealing with different situations. Now, you could apply those sentences to pretty much any open world FPS game, but I am curious if the immersive sim approach that they've marketed, if that will come into play here, and if there will be skills associated with sneaking around, for instance, or other modes of combat. That might not be the case though. It may be that you'll simply choose armor and weapons that best suit how you wish to play, meaning the game won't have any skills, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine either way. Not every game needs to be a full-on RPG, and given the reactivity they promise with quests, it's probably best that they don't try and promise too much. They do talk about Unreal 5, which is what Stalker 2 is using as its engine. The PC requirements, they look pretty hefty, which is standard for Unreal 5 games, let's be honest, but I'm really not sure how well optimized this game is going to be. A lot of Unreal games have been a real struggle to run, even if you meet or exceed their requirements, and they continue to have problems long after launch. Given Stalker 2 isn't being made by a mainstream team, it's probably fair to assume they'll likely have some problems developing this game in the engine. No one seems to have figured out how to get good performance out of Unreal 5 yet, and I doubt that it's going to be these devs that crack the secrets. Next, a save checkpoint system is discussed, with the interviewer asking if you can manually save at any time like you could do in the previous games. This was brought up because apparently you couldn't just save whenever you wanted in the demo that was provided. The CEO answers, you can definitely save whenever you want. The checkpoint system for the demo was purely there to ensure all focus was on the gameplay, and that's probably because the demo was in these people's hands for a short period of time. Now, saving might seem super obvious, not a big deal, but this at least clears up any potential red flags. Lastly, the Q1 2024 release date is discussed, and they talk about if the game is still on track. The dev responds, talking about the final stretch. He mentions that polishing, it definitely takes some time, and due to the size and complexity of the world, there could potentially be many challenges for them. Due to this being a translation, how he said this exactly, it may sound worse than it was actually meant, but it just seems like he's being open with the fact that the game is going to have plenty of bugs. This is unfortunately how most games seem to release now, and with Stalker 2 being an ambitious game from a studio that haven't really shipped a big title in many years, predicting this would not have been a brave call. You could have been pretty safe to expect this. It will be a shame if this does release a bit buggy, a bit broken, but for me, I do genuinely care more about the core experience. If we think of Starfield, the fundamental game is unfun, unfulfilling, and no bug fixing is ever going to make that game interesting. As long as Stalker 2 is great underneath all the technical issues, it's got a chance. I don't want to make excuses for it, but I have enjoyed a lot of janky games if the quality is there underneath everything, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for now. I want to see that brilliant atmosphere from their first game in the series, Shadow of Chernobyl. I want interesting gunplay, awesome enemies, mutants, abominations. If it can deliver that and we get an intriguing story, then this could be a game that I support. It might be great, however, equally it could also be a big pile of rubbish, so keep that in mind. The Stalker series has a lot of passionate fans, and something middling, it's not going to be immune to criticism. The series itself has already had trouble with an older version of Stalker 2 being cancelled some years ago, and the devs themselves, their most recent release was a 2016 strategy game called Cossacks 3. This game underwhelmed, so they certainly don't have a perfect track record by any means. That being said, the Stalker IP may be in a great place to succeed, given that the Chernobyl TV series did create a lot of mainstream interest in this sort of setting. If they can deliver, it could be the start of something great, though that is a big if. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.